So this is the first session per se of Finovity, and we are talking about a wonderful topic, which is resilience next. Okay, what is the kind of resilience and recovery that we are looking for in the financial services sector? So Vishal, you have been consulting in the practice, in the risk practice, resilience practice. There are several approaches to business continuity that we have been seeing. How sustainable is it? And what is the difference between business continuity and resilience according to you?
No, first of all, thanks, Babu, for arranging this session and including this topic, because this topic is something which we have realized. If I just take half a minute going back to, say, a couple of decades, we have always, in our daily life as an individual, we are always living on the edge. You know, we have a huge risk appetite, whether it's in a personal capacity or a professional as a company capacity. And that's why this agenda or the subject of BCM or DR or resilience has always been more on the reactive side. So God forbid some incident happened and then react. 9/11 happened, 26/11 happened, 26 July happened, and now biggest of all was the COVID. And then COVID changed the entire operating model. So the approach, the way we look at it is that we have seen that the companies have evolved over from a backup DR to emergency response to over a period of business continuity. And then the last 3-4 years, I would say the way threat landscape has changed, whether it's the cyber side, geopolitical side, operating environment, operating model getting changed because of the entire work from home system coming into picture. People have realized that risk is there. So we don't have to be reactive, we have to be proactive. And that's why you see in most of the top 10 risk of the board risk or agenda, we have seen that business continuity is coming as a top 10 risk also. And which is where it's like when the pandemic was ending, people said we have moved from pandemic to endemic, which means we have to live with COVID. We don't have a choice, let's move and have vaccinations and other stuff. The same thing is the subject of resilience. So don't treat it as a reactive stuff that something goes wrong and this is what I will do. You build your entire organization, your processes and everything in a way that you can withstand the risk and the impact. And which is being saying the word resilience, that this is how much resilience, how much I am on this. And the interesting part is, that's why I'm very happy that I have seen that organizations are approaching us as a consultant, and then I've seen that either they're doing on their own or approaching third party or whatever it is, there is a huge amount of, I would say, discussion or internal initiatives which are being taken to address this subject of being resilient. So it is not really getting into a very reactive, but more of a proactive. In terms of another, so in a way they are integrating enterprise risk with resilience subject.
Okay.
The reason is that if you are identified your risk, you are monitoring your risk after a threshold, converting into a risk indicator to a crisis indicator converting into actual event which happens, you may get some bit of a lead time or a heads up to be better prepared. So that's the entire approach of, and that's why we are using the word resilience rather than calling just a business continuity. The idea is that business will continue, risk will be there, how can we be more resilient?
Sajid, if I come to you and ask you about how are organizations today, when you are working with them, are they really thinking resilience grounds up, number one? And if they are not, what should they do? And how can you actually build this resilience grounds up?
As Vishal rightly said, that we have evolved in this domain over a period of time. So starting with doing a disaster recovery to ensuring the data is backed up, to building business continuity of having a recovery plan in case of disruptions. But what resilience is all about, business continuity was only a part of resilience, and people are using this word interchangeably without understanding the meaning of resilience. Business continuity is part of resilience, but resilience means much more than just business continuity management. So as you said, BCP is resilience by recovery. But when you're trying to be proactive, you need to be resilience by design of it. And by design, I mean that while the business continuity will take care of the impact and reduce the impact, the design part will ensure, or to an extent will mitigate the risk from happening or the disruption from happening. So let me give you a simple example. COVID is a good example, and what we practice here. When you fall sick, take human being as an organization. So when you fall sick, you have medicines to recover. That's your BCP. but then having a healthy lifestyle and ensuring that we do a social distancing and taking care to increase our immunity will make you more resilient and avoid getting COVID. So that is resilience by design. So in terms of operations, what a lot of organizations are doing are building up BCPs, but not building up resilience. So to build resilience, they need to make this part when they're designing the process itself. So for example, if you're trying to build an operations in say Mumbai, and you're putting 100 people here, and then to have a recovery, you're putting 50 seats in some of the other cities to have a recovery site, you're actually investing in 150 seats of business, 100 that you're going to use and 50 for your BCP. But if you divide this team between say Mumbai and Delhi and make 50 here and 50 there, those seats will actually work as BCP for each other and you don't need to invest much more. So having this concept during the design phase itself not only will increase the resilience of the organization, but will actually ensure that the cost stays pretty much the same.
So it is strategically relooking at the same problem and planning solutions strategically so that you mitigate the risks even before it happens.
100%. BCP is a tactical subject and resilience is a strategic subject. So the top leadership has to get involved as part of the strategy and ensure that their normal operations is adaptable enough to cover for any kind of disruptions. You can't think of all the scenarios that is happening, but you can build the capabilities to take care of various elements of your businesses and process to cater to any scenarios.
Interesting. So what are the key elements of resilience which organizations have to basically focus on in the future?
So, okay, so that's very interesting. So if you ask me the elements of resilience, well, the nuts and bolts remain same. Let me put it this way. It is the right place where you have to tighten it and make it functional, that is important. If I use the way we use it, and allow me to use the Deloitte terminology, what we call it as workforce and workplace. We divide the organization into workforce and workplace, and those elements, then you apply resiliency that works, what is the process related design, resilience by design as he was referring to. When you go to a workforce, which means the employee resilience part, which means the employee himself is resilient even if something goes wrong. The other aspect on the employee or the people side is the leadership, how are they reacting at the time of an event or a crisis. Now that is very important, and which is where a lot of these boardroom crisis simulation activities which are happening, which are very near to a real time. You obviously cannot create a disaster, but you actually test them that you're aware of your roles and responsibility, even to the extent that it's not question of normal, say, natural or a cyber or technology disaster, even something attacking the brand and reputation. Who will speak what, at what time, when you have to communicate, what should be your public presence, to that level of tightness which is required in that is the work. So the employee and the workforce has two aspects. One is the general employee and the other the leadership. How you manage the crisis and what you do during the crisis, it's the both ways. And that is something which is required to be focused upon. The third component, which is workplace, now that has become very interesting, especially after COVID, the entire operating model which has changed. And BFS, I am sure, not changed much, because I know with due credit and hats off to most of you, because I realized that banks were still operating no matter what lockdown happened, and that you were, I think, among the sectors which were still like a real warrior on the corporate side. So thank you so much for that. The specific, most of the sectors you see the hybrid model came in, the work from home. Now when we used to develop the BCM or the crisis, we used to do a site risk assessment. What are the risks to this site? When you go to a work from home, then this site approach will not work. Then you have to take the team approach, and in fact we were discussing with one of the leading IT companies and we are helping them on this subject, and we realized that they are capturing the current residence location of that each employee. So they are aware that any point of time where is which employee, and they realize that instead of 5 offices in India, they have 300 locations where their employees are working. Now the entire approach of risk assessment has changed, and then at the same time, my home environment is not in your control as a company. So that approach is also changed. So the idea here, what I'm trying to, in the interest of time, there's a huge other components. If you take this step-by-step approach, then you identify all the external factors in terms of what threat landscape has changed. Cyber especially has picked up big time in COVID. You see a lot of phishing attack, a lot of these data leakage and other stuff. When you talk about the infrastructure availability part, because your entire work from home, the approach you connect to your business application, the path you take has changed. Earlier, we were sitting in an office and you know that is the server room in the corner of that floor where I have to go and access. And then the secure pipe to other location. But now everybody is accessing from outside. So your entire approach and your attack surface has increased. So your resilience from the technology side is increased. And if I touch upon the subject of this, the theme of Finovity, with a lot of innovation and dependency, one is that the BFSI sector itself is dependent on the entire sector. You are like a critical infrastructure, if not the tangible one, but you are the critical infrastructure. And the other way is that you are evolving with a lot of innovation, which what Manish was just showing, that different types of stuff which is happening. Now that is, and if you see, all the theme is moving around the digital part, which means my dependency on technology has increased in all these spaces, whether it's a product, services, people, or your accessibility on the operating model. So the resilience focus should now go into the technology side. So it is no more a DR type of stuff, it is a resilient technology also.
Wonderful. Coming to you, Sajid, we heard a lot of interesting stuff from Vishal. When you work with customers, okay, what approach have you been taking? How are you trying to identify if the companies are going grounds up, or are you doing stopgap arrangement or whatever it is? So how are you trying to make things possible for the organizations to strategically implement resilience?
Okay, another good question. So, Babu, what we have noticed in our experience so far while implementing resilience is, while the technology side is using all the latest technologies and automations to manage the resilience of their subject domain, the businesses to which they are trying to build this resilience for are still relying on manual processes of recovery. So their BCP plans, their BIAs are still done on Excel and Word. Now, the challenge with that is, while the technology is ready to recover, the decision making is actually taking longer because they are referring to manuals and Excel. So while the technology is ready to say, do I have to implement DR and others, the decision from the crisis management takes 1 or 2 hours of assessment before they actually give the go ahead. And imagine a bank being down for 2 more hours of operations, and the cost of automating that is one of the, what I would say, the gap in our thinking, which is missing the strategic part of it. That if at the end all this technology is to support businesses and processes, why are they planning their, the BIAs and BCPs manually and not going for automation? The second thing what we have observed, what he was talking about as well is, we've evolved, right, as a resilience. We started with DR, as we said, then BCP, crisis management, emergency evacuation. But again, thinking little long term, pandemic, we all thought it only surprised. It actually didn't surprise. One of our clients, we did a pandemic scenario exercise 3 years back. And that client actually hired us because they had a huge, disruption. And because of that, the entire BCM team had to be fired. And the very same organization, during pandemic, got the best recovery of the year award in Middle East and Africa. So it's not that we can't see. And for example, when you're talking about resilience, I mean, thinking little long term, I think one of the key elements that you will hear people doing very seriously very soon is on environmental resilience, the corporate social responsibilities. Today, for example, we're not taking care of the climate changes, and in the end, what is happening is we are creating more disruption. You see the adverse weathers, the snow, rains, tornadoes, all increasing. Similarly, we are an agriculture-based, country.
Economy.
The farm sector themselves are exploiting or are, promoting the way of doing agriculture, which is exploiting the agriculture ground, soil. For example, the way we are, using our fertilizers and everything is actually reducing the fertility of the soil that we are using, and we are converting them into sand. So we are killing this very same business that we are actually, want to sustain for a long time. And we have seen businesses being closed because of this exploitation of, natural wealth that we had. And if you just look at the study, by 2035, we will be actually producing 20% less food grains from the very same, agriculture practices that we are doing today. So we will be actually reducing the supply as well. What we advice as Ascent to our clients is to have a sustainable model. Because if your business does not sustain, even the core value of you having a high valuation for your organization will reduce, because over a period of time, the opportunity that you have to do your business will also reduce. And if you do not have a long-term business plans or the opportunity to sustain that business for a long period of time, would automatically reduce the valuation. So all of these will have to be taken, and it has to be, now with pandemic, it has to become the core process of each organization to have BCM, resilience, and actually an automation of resilience.
Interesting, very well put on how the organization should look at resilience for the future, especially in financial sector.
Okay, so I've obviously the advisory goes a big one, but then I'll just say a small one is that 2-3 things important here. You may have the BCM, because I know there is a lot of regulatory pressure. You must have got those mandate to have cyber resilience plans and other stuff. So maybe you have to relook your business continuity and from the integration with the risk part. So that is one aspect which is important. And if your operating model has also changed, being if you're not bank or insurance or other company, that is one. Second, increase the coverage from just a micro operating environment to a macro level, which means that any other threat landscape or geopolitical crisis can also hit you. So don't restrict yourself only from an operating environment point of view, but you may have to look from a strategic point of view. That's number 2. And number 3 is expand as I said, the scope, not limiting. So again, one simple is that you may have a BCM team which will do the work. So don't make it a team-specific roles and responsibility, but try to embed that as a part. Everybody has a role to play, which is important. So it is not that one component or part of the organization will make you resilient, but it's the entire organization and employee which will make you resilient. So that awareness and the roles which everybody has to play is very critical. And there is a huge list, whether it's automation or any other solution or whatever you do, a GRC solution. But a follow-up on the biggest challenge on BCM is the sustenance part of it. You do it one-time exercise, spend 6 months, 8 months, 1 year, and then it is like a document somewhere else. That is something.
Fantastic. So that is the short and crisp session, and I think we could get a lot of information on that. And of course, we can always talk more and more about it offline and do it more in the reports that we could come up in the future. Thank you very much, Sajid. Thank you very much, Vishal. Thank you. Thank you.